In this video, I'm going to keep going with our data project. In the last video, I got information on the trade deficit, introduced you to FRED, Federal Reserve Economic Data, and we got information about the trade deficit, the imports and exports. So now the independent variable is a little more complicated, right? I mean, our dependent variable is pretty straightforward. It's practically a statistic, right? It is a statistic. It isn't completely, unproblematic in that we know that governments track what comes into their country more than what goes out. So data on imports is always better and more complete than data on exports. But it's not that, that other than that, it's pretty straightforward. The question is, hey, the theory is that money coming into the U.S. is driving the trade deficit. And so net flows of money into the U.S. should be correlated to the size of the trade deficit, as it goes along. So how do we measure that? That's a little more complicated. I'm going to start looking up a measure that is not good, okay? I'm going to start, and I've kind of done it, follow me through, but I just want to say, let's get something. It's going to be imperfect, but I also want to show you how we import the data and how we run a regression. So, yay, here we go. So, Fred, I'm going to say, hey, foreign investment, all right? And I've already done this, right? So I've typed that in, and here's the search result. And direct foreign investment in the U.S., all right? Now, this is imperfect because this is a type. It's foreign direct investment. That's a particular thing. That's when you invest in a country in its in a enterprise, right? So it's building something, right, or along those lines. So foreign direct investment in the U.S., buying stocks, that sort of thing. Well, actually, we got a question. What is in here, right? That's always your problem in using data sets. But the big thing that we know it's wrong is it's not a net foreign investment, right? Because we know the U.S. is investing, U.S. investors invest overseas. So this is not perfect. However, let's just take a look. So I've got this. I can download the data, and I've already done it, and we have it in Excel. So let's go now to Excel. If we download the data, this is what we get, right? We have quarterly data, and in all of these Excel sheets, you're going to have a README file, which is going to say, talk about it. Here is the unique identifier of that piece of data, which is handy to have to look up to get back into the FRED database. And here's an explanation. It's in the rest of the world or row data, and it's foreign direct investment in the U.S. Foreign direct investment in the U.S. All right. So what are we going to do with this? Well, what we want to do is we want to merge it with the other data. And so previously, I had gotten data, right? This is the data I looked at in the previous video, right? This is the imports, exports, and GDP of the U.S. This one's not really relevant. That I had that in there before, but let's just hang on to it. And the thing is, though, remember, it's the gap, the difference between imports and exports that we're interested in. So I've had to create a column that's the trade deficit, and I've taken imports minus exports, right? So sometimes this would be expressed as a negative number because it's a net loss, but I'm calling it the trade deficit. By definition, a deficit is a loss, so I'm just going to go with it in absolute terms. How much do exports exceed imports? And there are negatives, right? So in a quarter in which our exports exceeded our imports, we get negative numbers, okay? But important to keep track of your signs. Here's the data that I cut and paste from the other thing. Now, pro tip, I didn't just bring in the row, right, data, or the row rest of the world foreign direct investment. I just didn't bring in the FDI numbers. I brought the observation dates because we've got to make this column line up with this column. Little pro tip, I was going to do that anyway to tell you about it, and it turns out to be critical because if we look here, first row, 1970. Second row, hey, 1970 here, but 1971 here. We have missing data. They don't have quarterly data for 1970. Their quarterly data only really starts in 1971. So what we have to do, it's kind of annoying. We've got to basically shift this down. There, we got to cut this stuff. We got to go cut, and then we have to find, where is it, 1971. We've got to paste, right? And so now we've got the gap. And do things line up? Yes, that lines up. 7301, and you just basically go to the bottom, say, are we ending up at the same 2410, right? So this is the last quarter that starts in October of 24. Yeah, they both line up. We're good to go. All right. Now, it's a little bit messy. We got some messiness here. First of all, we know, if we've paid attention to our things, we know this is millions of dollars and this is billions of dollars, right? From looking at the README files, we know that the units here are not the same. So what we're also going to want to do is we're going to want to say, hey, let's divide this by 1,000 to convert it to millions. And then I just, if you just fill down, I won't do the whole thing, but, if I fill down, all right, now I've got million. I've got billions. And notice they're a lot smaller, right? There's a lot, there's so like I say, I'm not sure this is going to work, but let's just go with it. Now, to clean things up, I've basically, because we got things at different starting points, I've made a separate sheet, and I'm going to take the trade. I've got basically that trade deficit information, right? Starting in 1971, I have our labels here. I've created a label FDI US, and this is the in billions of dollars. It's the row FDI 27QS, blah, blah, blah. I've created my own label here. So now we've got pretty data that we can do a regression on. So to do this, we're going to go and hit data, and then we're going to hit data analysis. Now, if you've never done a regression in Excel, you aren't necessarily going to have that button there. You've got to enable the statistics add-in, right, in order to get it. But once we have it, it works pretty quick, right? You have a whole list of things you can do. The last thing I did was regression, so it's going to show up as a regression. To do the regression, I click on regression, and I've got to input some fields. Now, I've done this before on this, so let me, it always comes back with the last thing you did, which is actually very handy sometimes. So let me just zero everything out. So basically, what we need to do a regression, we need to tell it the Y range. Y is always the independent variable. So we go in here and we say, what's the independent, or excuse me, Y is the dependent variable. And so we want to say, all right, what is the range of our dependent variable information? It's trade deficit. I'm talking over this because the scrolling takes forever. But we scroll down, we highlight the range here of our trade deficit info. We put that in. Then what's our Y range? Well, we have this imperfect variable FDI US. So I'm going to highlight this, and this, like I say, sometimes that takes longer than it does to calculate the results, trust me. Now we've got this column for labels. I had labels at the top, so this tells the computer, hey, the first row is words. Those are the labels associated with the variables. The other thing to do is to tell it where to put the output, right? And so I'm going to go first regression FDI. All right, so I'm going to say, here's our first regression, and create a worksheet plot. And you've got some other things you can check. Don't worry about them. We hit OK. Bam, it's done, right? And we get, everything's kind of bunched up. But here are our results. Now, just quickly to see what our results are. We got a lot of stuff here, right? And so this stuff, our regression statistics here, this is about the whole model, right? How it worked, what did we find, right? And a key thing here is our R squared. That's a goodness of fit. This variable, this using just this one variable, we've explained 40% of the variation. That's what R squared tells you. What percentage of the variation in the dependent variable was explained. So there's that. ANOVA, these things tell us, hey, did this model as a whole do anything? We don't really use that much. The main stuff is down here. And what we really want to look at is this line, right? This is our regression coefficient, right? Our standard error and our t-stat, right? And the thing is there a correlation? And yes, FDI is correlated, right? And the correlation is that, it's not one-to-one, but for every $1 billion increase in foreign direct investment, we get a $1.2 billion increase in the trade deficit, right? According to this estimation. And this is a very imperfect thing because we've only got one variable. We're only explaining 40% of the variation in the model. But standard error is related to how much this varies, how much variance there is in it. The key thing is the p-value. This is your statistical significance. What are the odds that this relationship would be there if there was nothing going on, right? This is the null hypothesis idea. Our p-value here is expressed in scientific notation, e to the negative 27. There are 27, it's 0.27 zeros, 6. Okay, small, right? It's very small. So what this result tells us, we don't really, it's a trash result, right? It's an exploratory thing because we know it's not a net value. We know that the values don't really line up. We know from our R squared that we're only explaining 40% of the variation in this. But for a first result, we are finding that there is a correlation, a statistically significant correlation. When foreign direct investment in the U.S. goes up, the trade deficit goes up. And it goes up very close to a 1-to-1 in their estimation, right? Which is interesting because we know that's not net, but we know there's other things going on out there. One variable will never tell us the story. We probably need a better variable, right? We might need a better measure of our independent variable. We might need other variables to account for it, right? And to say what's going on with other things that would be related. But that is how we do a quick and dirty regression. The question of, what are coefficients? What are t-stats, right? That you've got to plug that in to the knowledge of what a regression is and how it tries to match a line to the data. But this is how you do it, right? This is how you do a regression. It doesn't take a lot of work. Yes, it's 13 minutes for me to explain it all, but it almost goes quicker in the doing than the watching. So there's your first little dip of the toe into data analysis. I hope this has made things clearer. And obviously, as we go forward, I will look at other variables and, kind of see what the results are and present them to you as we go along.